My twin sister was diagnosed with something called Sibling Competition Disorder. Whenever my grades beat hers, she stopped sleeping and took a razor to her arms. Dr. Prescott's treatment plan was absurd. Make me worse. My family threw themselves into it. Mom set my alarm back, watched me sprint out the door, and turned to Molly. Your sister won't make it in time now. My brother offered me a ride, then swore the car had died 5 minutes in. When I got out and ran for it, he was grinning at me in the mirror. My childhood friend held me like he was calming a toddler. So bomb one test. You're smart. What's a gap year? Molly's scores climbed, and everyone agreed the plan was working. On the morning of the Kestrel Collegiate Assessment, someone handed me a bottle of water. I hesitated. I drank it anyway. 10 minutes in, I ran out of the exam room with both hands on my stomach. They all turned to look at me, faces arranged into concern. I saying the plan had worked. That was the moment the last thing I still hoped for died. I only wondered what they'd do when they found out the one they'd destroyed was Molly. I came out of that bathroom wrung out. My legs shook. I braced a hand against the wall and dragged myself into the hallway. They closed in around me, all of them wearing the same borrowed concern. Mom looked guilty. Audrey, don't blame us. If Molly can't get into Northstar or Eastboro because of you, she'll have another episode tonight. Be good. Let your sister have this. My brother didn't even bother pretending. Audrey, if you don't get into a good school, I'll take care of you. Colin Barrett, who'd lived next door since we were 5, tried to sound gentle. Exactly. Your grades are great. Sit out a year and retest. 18 years of work, and all of it came down to Molly Sutton's so-called illness. They tried every trick they could invent to make me fail. I had nothing left to say to any of them. I turned to go. Mom caught my arm. Molly isn't out yet. Wait for her with us. They didn't see my white lips, or my hands pressed flat against the cramps tearing through my stomach. There was only ever room in them for Molly. The bell rang. Molly came out with her face crumpled. Audrey, you finished so early. You must have handed yours in ahead of time. I knew I could never beat you. Her eyes drifted to the big oak at the edge of the lot. Maybe I should just run into that tree and be done with it. At least then I won't humiliate myself when the scores come out. Mom pulled her in immediately. Sweetheart, what are you saying? Dylan laughed. Come on. Your sister isn't in your league. Who knows what Audrey ate this morning? She bolted 10 minutes after the test started. She was in there a solid hour. Molly studied their faces and asked carefully. You're not lying to me? Colin threw up a hand. I swear we're not. You can't hand in a paper until the last 30 minutes, and she walked out after 10. That's a rules violation. They wouldn't even let her back in. I watched them hand Molly the wreckage of my future like a party favor. I thought that part of me had died a long time ago. It still hurt. It took a long time for any of them to remember I was standing there. Molly, ask your sister yourself. Isn't that what happened? Under all those hopeful stares, I answered. Yes. I didn't write a single word. Something bright moved across Molly's face. I'll get a 0 in language arts, I said. The rest won't matter now. So I'm not taking them. Audrey, are you serious? I nodded, slow and deliberate. I am. After the assessment ended, Molly hung off Mom's arm, delighted. Mom, Audrey skipped the rest of the tests, and I felt amazing in there. I might have gotten all 1,200. I might be the top scorer in the country. Mom stroked her hair. Of course you are. Molly's the best. Audrey was never going to keep up with you. Tell me what you want as a present. Molly tilted her head and suddenly looked at me. If I did that well, you shouldn't get me anything. Give it to Audrey instead. Call it an early consolation prize. Molly always did this. Every sentence sounded generous, and every one of them was a foot on my neck. Dylan smiled and opened his banking app. Molly, you crushed it and you're still thinking about your sister. That deserves something. Audrey didn't even sit the exam, but Molly asked us to include her. So I'll send you both a little cash. How's that? Both our phones chimed at once. Dylan, $120,000? I love you so much. Molly shrieked, threw her arms around him and kissed his cheek. Audrey, hurry up and see what he sent you. Before I could reach for my phone, Colin took it out of my hand and opened the transfer. 1 cent. Molly turned to Dylan with theatrical outrage. That's so unfair. How could you give her that little? Dylan spread his hands. Don't blame me, sweetheart. I was perfectly fair. Molly scored a perfect 1,200, so 100 times that is 120,000. Audrey didn't take it at all. 1 cent was already generous. Molly nodded. Okay, that's actually fair. Audrey, you can't be mad at him. Your stomach's the one that let you down. I took my phone back from Colin without a word. Then I stood up to go. Whether I stayed or not, there was only one person in that room they were celebrating. Audrey, you're not upset that I did well, are you? Before I could answer, Mom, Dylan, and Colin were all watching me like guards, terrified my next breath might upset Molly. No. I'm going to get your present. The second I walked into my room, I saw them sitting on my desk. The 3 things I'd treasured most. The Northstar pen Colin gave me the day he promised he'd be waiting for me there. The brass fountain pen Dylan gave me when he told me I'd go as far as I wanted. The St. Jude medal Mom had blessed at church, back when she told me I'd graduate at the top of my class. I didn't want any of them anymore. The same way I no longer wanted the people who'd given them to me. I carried all 3 back to the living room. Molly, these are for you. Mom's face changed the moment she saw them. Audrey, isn't that the St. Jude medal I got you? He smiled to her. It is, Mom. I don't have money to buy Molly anything new, so all I can give her are the things I cared about most. Mom stared. Didn't I tell Dylan to give you spending money? Dylan rubbed the back of his neck. Molly's been unstable. I used it keeping her happy. Audrey doesn't spend anything anyway. Call it her contribution to Molly's treatment. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. Molly's grades were terrible, her moods were a weather system, and every want she had became an emergency. I couldn't afford a practice workbook without earning the money myself. They never noticed how late I came home from shifts, because every time I walked in, they were gathered around Molly. As far as any of them were concerned, I didn't really matter. Since Molly mattered that much, and since they believed every word out of her mouth, I decided to give them something magnificent. Mom, Molly said you should get me something to cheer me up, right? I don't need cheering up. I want you to give Molly something instead. From me. Mom smiled, warmed by how reasonable her older daughter was being. Tell me what it is. I'll pay for it. Let's throw Molly a party for her scores, and invite everyone we know. Yes, absolutely. Molly did so well, we have to celebrate. They crowded around her, all talking over each other about the party. Colin shoved me aside without thinking about it. He just wanted the spot closest to her. I lost my footing and cracked my forehead on the corner of the coffee table. The sound it made was dull, and nobody heard it. A knot came up over my eyebrow right away. I didn't say anything. I got up quietly and let myself out. Telling them would have changed nothing. Besides, I still had tuition to earn. At the Silverline Karaoke Lounge, I changed into my uniform and started working the floor, selling bottle service room to room. Then I heard voices I knew. I opened the door, and Molly stared at me. Audrey. I stopped. Mom, Dylan, and Colin all turned at once. Mom took one look at the uniform, and her face went hard. Audrey, are you trying to ruin your life? I know you scored a 0 this year, but we agreed you were taking a gap year and retesting. You're smart. Is this what you want? Serving drinks for the rest of your life? Dylan frowned. Are you doing this on purpose? Colin grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the hallway. Come home. You start studying again tonight. Looking at the 3 of them, I almost laughed. They'd spent years trying to make me worse. Now that they thought it had worked, why were they so unhappy? For the next several days they kept me in my room and watched me study. Their attention was rare, and it exhausted me. Mom, is my dress ready? Today's the most important day of my life. Mom came hurrying in with a garment box. Sweetheart, I had this made for you. $60,000. Dylan produced a velvet case like a magician. And this is from me. A pink diamond necklace. $500,000. Colin refused to be outdone. Look at mine. My mother took this antique tiara at auction. Over $10 million. Molly gathered it all up and dressed like a princess. The princess got into a town car and left for the Citron Grand Hotel with her court around her. They forgot me in the house. A while later, a message came through on my phone. Audrey, find your own way to the hotel. I didn't argue. It was an important day, and I'd been waiting a long time to watch it. By the time I reached the hotel on foot, my face was soaked and my shirt was stuck to my back. Mom frowned when she saw me. How did you let yourself get like this? It's Molly's day. You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing? If I'd had any money, I wouldn't have walked the whole way. I didn't bother explaining. They'd never actually looked at me anyway. Dylan found a server's uniform somewhere and threw it at me. Put this on. Don't sit at the main tables. Find a corner in the back and stay there. Don't get in the way of Molly's party. The party started, and every guest lined up to tell Mom what a daughter she'd raised. Then a commotion broke out near the entrance. People started whispering. Isn't that the admissions director from Northstar Institute of Technology? That's her. And the man beside her is from Eastborough. That Sutton girl must be something. Pacific Harbor sent someone all the way from Calden. Molly listened to all of it, glowing, and looked over at our family. I told you. I did incredibly well. I really might be the top scorer in the country. Colin's parents had Molly's hands in theirs, already in love with her. Our Molly's really something. Once you pick Northstar or Eastborough, Colin will have company. They'd said those exact words to me once. The directors from Northstar, Eastborough, and Pacific Harbor pushed through the crowd toward Molly. Audrey Sutton. Choose our school. We'll give you everything we have. At the sound of my name, Mom and the others exchanged a stunned look. You've made a mistake. Molly's the top scorer in the country. Dylan jumped in behind her. You've definitely got the wrong student. Audrey didn't even finish the exam. Why would you want her? Pull the scores. Check them right here, and you'll see Molly came out first. Wouldn't that be cruel to her, though? She barely tested, and once the numbers come up, mine will be so much higher. She'll be crushed. Molly glanced at me while she said it, wearing her concern like a costume. Mom saw nothing cruel in it at all. It's fine. Your sister's tougher than she looks. We'll check right here in front of everyone, so they can all see how remarkable you are. I'd gone numb a long time ago. I'd lost count of how many times they'd made an example of me. It started the day they launched their campaign to make Audrey worse. They reset my alarm. They left me on the side of the road. They found a way to interfere with every test I sat. And every time, they laughed about it while they soothed Molly. See? Your sister didn't do as well as you this time. Molly's the smart one in this family. The second your mood improves, you leave Audrey in the dust. It never once occurred to them to ask whether any of it hurt. Tonight was no different. They were going to execute me in public, for Molly's entertainment. Dylan didn't hesitate. He waved down a hotel employee. Get me a laptop. We'll start with Audrey's score. He typed in my exam ID. One number came up on the screen. 0. The room broke into jeering. Nobody scores an actual 0. That takes effort. I heard their older girl used to be brilliant. What happened? Did she fall in with the wrong crowd? Somebody said they saw her working at a karaoke bar. You don't think? Not one person in my family said a word for me. You see? I told you there'd been a mistake. Look at that score. There is no possible way you came here for her. Look at Molly. She's the one you want. They pushed Molly out in front of the university reps. Colin stepped up, pleased with himself. Go on, pull Molly's up. Give the room something to talk about. Dylan smiled, entered Molly's exam ID and waited. Every guest held their breath while the portal refreshed. The number came up huge on the screen. 0. The silence in the grand ballroom of the Citron Grand Hotel was not a quiet pause. It was an abrupt, suffocating vacuum, the kind that follows the detonation of an explosive. On the massive projector screen behind the dais, Molly Sutton's name was rendered in pristine, high-resolution black type. Directly beneath her candidate number, the score box was highlighted in a violent, flashing crimson. Candidate Molly Sutton. Composite score 0000/1200. Status disqualified. Academic irregularity/blank submission. Dylan's hand remained frozen on the laptop trackpad. His smile had not entirely melted off his face. Instead, it had petrified into a grotesque half-drawn grimace. That's a glitch, Dylan stammered, clicking the refresh button. Frantically. The server is overloaded. Millions of students are checking right now. It's a database error. He refreshed it once, twice, 3 times. The crimson banner remained unchanged. Beside him, Molly's breath hitched. The champagne flute in her hand began to tremble, the pale liquid shivering against the crystal. Dylan, what is that? Why does it say disqualified? I wrote everything. I answered every single section. I spent months preparing. Of course you did, darling, Mom said, her voice dropping into that frantic, high-pitched coo she reserved exclusively for Molly's crises. She rushed to the podium, trying to block the projection with her own body. Everyone please, bear with us. The Kestrel Assessment Department clearly has a technical failure. My daughter is a straight A student. There is no technical failure, Mrs. Sutton, a crisp, authoritative voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Dean Evelyn Vance, the chief admissions director from the Northstar Institute of Technology, stepped forward onto the dais. Her sharp gray eyes did not spare Molly or my mother a single glance. Behind her stood Dr. Alastair Finch from Eastborough and Director Sterling from Pacific Harbor. Dean Vance held a heavy leather portfolio embossed with the golden crest of the National Collegiate Examination Board. We received the official audit report from the Chief Proctor's office at 5:00 this afternoon, Dean Vance stated, her voice echoing clearly over the ballroom's sound system. Candidate Molly Sutton's examination was flagged in the first 20 minutes. Her multiple-choice answer sheet contained identical, randomized error patterns matching a compromised leak from 3 years ago. When prompted for the free response and essay portions, she wrote nothing. Her booklet was returned completely blank. Molly's face drained of every drop of blood, turning a sickly, translucent white under the glittering chandelier light. No. Molly gasped, backing away until her heel caught the hem of her $60,000 custom silk gown. No. Someone changed my paper. Someone set me up. Audrey did this. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger directly at me in the back corner of the room. She works at that karaoke lounge. She knows shady people. She must have paid someone to swap my test. The room shifted its gaze to where I stood by the service door, wearing the black polyester server's vest Dylan had thrown at me. Director Finch from Eastborough adjusted his spectacles and let out a cold, incredulous chuckle. Miss Molly Sutton, your sister was nowhere near the grading centers, Finch said. Furthermore, the reason the three of us flew across the country on red-eye flights tonight was not to investigate your fraudulent paper. We came for the only student in the state who was granted the National Chancellor's early exemption. Mom froze. Dylan's hand slipped off the mouse. Colin Barrett, who had been standing beside Molly holding a velvet box with a $10 million tiara, looked up in dazed bewilderment. What exemption? Mom whispered. Dean Vance turned her back on Molly and walked straight down the center aisle of the ballroom. The socialites, council members, and wealthy neighbors parted for her like the sea before an oncoming ship. She stopped 2 feet in front of me, taking in my cheap server's apron the swelling bruise above my left eyebrow where Colin had knocked me into the coffee table, and the damp fabric of my sneakers from walking 5 miles in the heat. A flash of profound sorrow and fury crossed Dean Vance's aristocratic face. Audrey Sutton, Dean Vance said softly, extending both hands to present the thick ivory envelope sealed with gold wax. In March, your independent research thesis on quantum neural modeling was awarded the National Gold Laureate. You were awarded an unconditional presidential fellowship. You did not need to sit the Kestrel assessment. You only sat for it because your high school required a formal registration. Dean Vance paused, her voice rising so every person in the hall could hear. Northstar offers you a full 4-year fellowship, an independent research laboratory, a personal annual stipend of $80,000, and the direct mentorship of Nobel laureate Dr. Marcus Thorne. Director Finch stepped up beside her, pushing another ivory folder forward. Eastborough will double the research budget, Miss Sutton. We will provide you with full residential housing and immediate graduate standing. Pacific Harbor offers full tenure-track fast-tracking upon completion of your undergraduate degree. Director Sterling added eagerly. The ballroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum against the glass chandeliers. Colin's parents stood frozen by their table, their mouths slightly open. The guests who had spent the last hour whispering about the failure older sister, working in a hostess bar, looked as if they had swallowed broken glass. I looked down at the 3 gold embossed folders resting in front of me. For 18 years, I had believed that if I just worked hard enough, if I was just obedient enough, if I shrank myself until I took up no space at all, my family would finally look at me with pride. I had let them steal my alarm clocks. I had let them strand me on highways. I had swallowed drugged water and ruined my body in a filthy bathroom stall. And through it all, my intellect had never belonged to them. It belonged entirely to me. I reached out, took Dean Vance's folder, and tucked it under my arm. Thank you, Dean Vance. I said, my voice steady, clear, and devoid of tremor. I accept Northstar. Wait. Stop. Mom's shriek shattered the silence like breaking porcelain. She stumbled down the stage steps, her designer heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. She pushed past the university directors and grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging painfully into my skin through my server's shirt. Audrey, you won a national fellowship? In March. Mom's eyes were bloodshot, swimming with a mixture of shock, greed, and hysterical confusion. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you keep this from your own mother? I looked down at her hand on my forearm, then slowly raised my eyes to meet hers. Because in March, I said quietly, Molly failed her 3rd diagnostic test. And you told me that if I scored higher than her one more time, you would throw my textbooks into the furnace and kick me out on the street so Molly wouldn't feel insecure. Mom's face twitched. That was just an empty threat. I was trying to manage your sister's medical condition, Dr. Prescott said. Dr. Prescott was arrested on federal fraud charges 2 days ago, Mrs. Sutton. Director Finch interrupted with cold precision. The state medical licensing board revoked his credentials after uncovering a 7-year operation of falsifying psychiatric diagnoses for wealthy families seeking invalid testing exemptions. Sibling competition disorder does not exist in any recognized medical diagnostic manual. It was an elaborate fiction created to extract hundreds of thousands of dollars in private consulting fees. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Dylan rushed down the aisle, his face mottled with purple rage. That's a lie. Molly has real scars. She was bleeding. She was suffering. She was using theatrical blood and dull craft razors she bought at the stationery store down the street, Dylan, I said, looking my older brother dead in the eye. I found the receipts in her vanity drawer 6 months ago, along with the empty blister packs of phenolphthalein, the strong laxative you dissolved into my water bottle on the morning of the Kestrel assessment. Dylan recoiled as if I had struck him with a hot iron. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. You knew? Dylan whispered, his eyes widening in pure horror. You knew. The water was spiked. Of course I knew, I said, a faint, bitter smile touching the corner of my lips. You bought the water at the 7-Eleven on 4th Street at 6:15 a.m. You used your loyalty card. The seal was broken, and the cap had been glued back down with clear resin. You gave it to me and said, "Drink up, Audrey. Big day. Today." I took a step closer to him, watching the color drain entirely from his features. I drank it right in front of you because I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to see if my brother, who once taught me how to ride a bicycle, would actually poison me for a sister who wouldn't even share a piece of candy with. Oui, no. Dylan choked, taking a trembling step back. I didn't. I thought it would just give you a minor stomach ache. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted Molly to be happy for once. And Molly was happy, I said softly. She celebrated with $120,000 of your money, while you sent me a single cent. Beside the stage, Colin Barrett stood paralyzed. The antique $10 million tiara in his hands seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He looked at Molly, who was now huddled against the podium like a wild animal, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks, her breath coming in ragged, hysterical gulps. Then Colin looked at me. He saw the bruise on my forehead, the bruise he had given me when he shoved me into the coffee table so he could stand closer to Molly. He saw the server's uniform. He remembered the Northstar pin he had given me years ago, which I had returned to Molly like a piece of worthless scrap metal. Audrey. Colin's voice cracked. He dropped the velvet box containing the tiara onto an empty chair and rushed toward me, his hands reaching out. Plead like. Audrey, please, listen to me. I was manipulated. I thought I was helping a sick girl. You know how much I cared about you. We promised we'd go to Northstar together. You promised, I corrected him, stepping back so his fingers brushed only empty air. I made no promises to a boy who watched me bleed and laughed about it in the rearview mirror. The ballroom had devolved into an arena of public execution. Colin's parents, prominent figures in the city's real estate circle, marched onto the floor. Colin's mother snatched the antique tiara off the chair, her face contorted in blistering shame. Mrs. Sutton, Colin's mother said, her voice loud enough to carry to every corner of the room. The formal marriage proposal between our families is void. The engagement deposit will be recalled by our legal counsel first thing tomorrow morning. I suggest you keep your fraudulent younger daughter far away from our son. Wait. Mrs. Barrett, please. Mom wailed, running after them. Molly was just confused. She's young. She made a mistake. She committed academic fraud and conspiracy to tamper with a state examination, Colin's father spat, adjusting his cufflink with disgust. The Barrett family does not associate with felons. They turned on their heels and walked out, followed in rapid succession by the city council members, the corporate sponsors, and every single high society guest who had come to fawn over the country's top scorer. Within 10 minutes, the grand ballroom, draped in $50,000 of floral arrangements, stocked with $500 bottles of vintage wine, and illuminated by shimmering crystal, was virtually deserted. Only the Sutton family, the university directors, and I remained. Molly sat on the floor of the stage, her $60,000 dress torn at the hem, her tiara crooked, screaming like a toddler in a supermarket aisle. It's not fair. It's not fair. Molly shrieked, kicking the podium with her satin shoes. Audrey has everything. She's always had everything. She's smarter. She's prettier. Everyone loved her in middle school. Why can't I have just one thing? Why couldn't she just let me have Northstar? Dylan stood in the center of the aisle, staring at his hands, trembling uncontrollably. Mom turned back to me, her eyes wild, her hands clutching at my shoulders. Audrey, you have to fix this. You're the top student. You have the fellowship. Talk to Dean Vance. Tell her Molly was having an episode. Tell her to drop the cheating charges. If Molly gets a criminal record, her life is over. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who had spent the last 5 years turning my life into a slow, calculated execution to appease a spoiled monster. Molly's life is not over, Mom, I said calmly. It's just finally catching up to her. Audrey, I am your mother. Mom screamed, her voice cracking into a shrill screech. I raised you. I fed you. Everything you have came from this family. Everything I have, I replied, holding up the ivory acceptance letter from Northstar, was earned while you were locking me out in the cold. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the 1-cent transaction notification slip Dylan had sent me, and dropped it onto the marble floor at her feet. That's my contribution to Molly's future, I said. Keep the change. I turned to Dean Vance. Dean Vance, Director Finch, Director Sterling. Shall we go? I have a train to catch. Of course, Miss Sutton. Dean Vance said with a respectful nod. Our university. Car is waiting outside. As I walked toward the grand double doors of the Citron Grand Hotel, Dylan lunged after me, his knees slamming into the floor as he grabbed the edge of my sneaker. Audrey, don't leave. Please. I'm your brother. I bought you that fountain pen. Remember the brass pen? Dylan sobbed, tears and snot dripping onto the polished marble. I'll give you all the money back. I'll give you everything I have. Don't leave me alone with her. I stopped. I didn't look down at him. You gave that pen away, Dylan. I whispered into the quiet air. You gave it to Molly when she asked for it. You don't have a sister named Audrey anymore. I pulled my foot free from his grip and walked through the heavy glass doors, into the cool, clear night air. The collapse of the Sutton household was not a slow decay. It was a catastrophic avalanche. Within 48 hours, the news of the Kestrel assessment fraud and the public exposure of Dr. Prescott's sham clinic became a national scandal. The State Education Board launched a comprehensive criminal inquiry into the examination tampering. The forensic analysis of the water bottle I had surrendered to Dean Vance revealed high concentrations of medical-grade laxatives and sedatives. Because the tampering had occurred on state testing grounds with the intent to physically incapacitate a registered candidate, the district attorney filed formal felony charges against Dylan Sutton for reckless endangerment and administration of a controlled substance. Dylan's employer, a prestigious private equity firm where he had worked as a senior analyst, terminated his contract immediately to protect the firm's reputation. To make matters worse, an internal compliance audit revealed that Dylan had embezzled over $400,000 from client escrow accounts over the past 18 months, funds he had used to buy Molly's pink diamond necklace, designer handbags and luxury sports cars to keep her emotionally stable. He was arrested at his downtown apartment on a Tuesday morning, let out in handcuffs before the news cameras, facing 12 to 15 years in federal prison. Meanwhile, the financial ruin of my mother was swift and absolute. The $60,000 custom gown, the $500,000 necklace, and the five-star hotel booking had all been secured using credit lines backed by the Sutton family home, based on the assumption that Molly would secure a full-ride corporate endowment upon her high-scoring admission. With Molly disqualified, blacklisted from every tertiary institution in the nation and facing civil lawsuits from the testing board, the banks initiated foreclosure proceedings on the house. Every luxury item was repossessed by court martials. The pink diamond necklace was auctioned off at a fraction of its value to settle legal fees. The furniture was stripped from the living room. Molly's true nature, stripped of the veneer of victimhood, turned monstrous. With no money, no admirers, and no Audrey to torture, Molly turned her venom entirely on my mother. Neighbors in our old suburban street reported hearing screaming matches at all hours of the night. Molly smashed plates, threw furniture down the stairs, and cursed my mother for failing to make Audrey obey. You useless old hag. Molly's voice screeched through the broken windows of the foreclosed house. You couldn't even control your own daughter. If you had locked Audrey in the basement like I told you to, none of this would have happened. It's your fault I'm ruined. Mom, who had sacrificed everything, her savings, her older daughter's future, her dignity, to appease her younger child, sat on the bare floorboards of the stripped living room, weeping until her tears ran dry. She looked at the empty walls where my childhood academic certificates had once hung before she tore them down to avoid upsetting Molly. There was nothing left. No trophies. No money. No son. No brilliant daughter. Only a screaming, hateful parasite whom she had personally nurtured to destroy her life. 300 miles away, the autumn leaves on the Northstar Institute of Technology campus were turning brilliant shades of gold, amber, and crimson. The quadrangle was alive with the quiet, industrious hum of brilliant minds. Students with heavy backpacks walked between Gothic stone libraries and sleek, glass-walled research centers, debating astrophysics, advanced computational algorithms, and biomedical engineering. I sat at a wooden desk by the arched window of the Thorne Laboratory on the 4th floor of the Institute for Advanced Studies. The room smelled of old paper, warm solder, and fresh coffee. Across the mahogany table sat Dr. Marcus Thorne, a gentle, white-haired man who had won the Nobel Prize in Physics 4 years earlier. He pushed a red-penciled research draft toward me with a look of profound, grandfatherly warmth. Your revisions on the neural drift tensor equations are remarkable, Audrey. Dr. Thorne said, adjusting his glasses. The Department of Energy has approved our secondary grant. You will be presenting our preliminary findings at the International Cybernetics Symposium in Zurich next spring. I looked at the draft. At the top of the page, beneath the Northstar crest, my name was printed cleanly. Lead Research Fellow, Audrey Sutton. A strange, unfamiliar sensation settled deep in my chest. It wasn't relief. It was peace. For the first time in my life, No one was coming behind me to erase my name. No. One was setting my alarm back by 2 hours. No one was watching my breathing to see if my happiness would cause an episode in another room. My phone, sitting on the corner of the desk, vibrated once. It had a new number, registered through the university's private exchange. Only 3 people had it: Dean Vance, Dr. Thorne, and the administrative registrar. Yet, a message had filtered through the departmental directory portal. Audrey, please. Colin is in the hospital. He tried to see you last week, but security turned him away. He hasn't eaten in 4 days. He keeps holding your old Northstar pin. He says if you don't speak to him once, he'll jump from the Barrett Tower roof. Please just give him 5 minutes. For our childhood. From Barrett Family Legal Representative. I stared at the screen for 3 seconds. I did not feel anger. I did not feel pity. I felt the absolute, icy detachment of someone looking at a stranger's forgotten dry cleaning receipt. I tapped the screen, marked the sender as malicious spam, and blocked the entire domain from my server. Then I set the phone face down, picked up my brass fountain pen, a new weighted German model I had bought with my first fellowship paycheck, and went back to work on my equations. A year later, the first winter snow began to dust the slate roofs of Northstar. I was walking across the snow-covered central quadrangle toward the university auditorium, wearing a warm charcoal cashmere coat, a navy wool scarf, and leather boots. Under my arm, I carried the leather-bound symposium proceedings from Zurich, where my paper had received unanimous international acclaim. Audrey, a cracked, trembling voice cut through the muffled quiet of the falling snow. I stopped near the stone fountain, standing by the iron security gate, barred from entering the private academic quad by 2 uniformed campus guards, were 3 people. They looked like ghosts from a sunken ship. My mother stood shivering in a threadbare, moth-eaten wool cardigan that hung loosely from her emaciated shoulders. Her hair was completely gray, unwashed, and pulled back in a messy knot. Her face was hollowed out by deep, permanent lines of grief and poverty. Beside her stood Dylan. He was 25 years old, but he looked 40. He had just been released on provisional parole from the county correctional facility, his criminal record rendering him unemployable as anything more than a night shift loading dock laborer. His clothes were stained with grease, his eyes sunken, his shoulders permanently hunched in shame. And standing slightly behind them, leaning on a pair of metal crutches with his left leg cast in plaster, was Colin Barrett. His family's real estate company had collapsed following the fraud scandal and bad loans. The proud, golden boy athlete from next door had withered into a gaunt, broken shadow, his eyes wide and bloodshot, fixed onto me with a terrifying, desperate hunger. Audrey, Mom sobbed, pressing her bare, chapped hands against the iron bars of the gate. Audrey, my baby, look at you. You look so healthy, you look so beautiful. The campus security guard stepped forward, reaching for his radio. Dr. Sutton, do you know these individuals? We can have them removed immediately for trespassing. It's all right, Officer Miller, I said calmly, stepping within 3 paces of the gate, keeping the heavy iron bars between us. Give us 2 minutes. Mom fell to her knees in the wet snow right outside the gate, her hands reaching through the bars to try and touch the hem of my coat. Audrey, please listen to your mother, she wept, tears freezing on her wrinkled cheeks. The bank took the house. We're living in a 1-room motel on the highway. Molly ran off with a drug dealer from the South Side 6 months ago. She took the last $5,000 of my pension and vanished. I have nothing left, Audrey. I have no food. I have no medicine. Dylan dropped to his knees beside her, burying his face in his rough, calloused hands. Audrey, I'm sorry, Dylan choked out, his voice raw with a year of prison tears. I was a monster. Every single day in that cell, I thought about the water bottle. I thought about the way you looked at me when you drank it. I hate myself. I hate myself so much, Audrey. If you want me to kneel here until I freeze to death, I'll do it. Just please, acknowledge me as your brother. Again. Colin leaned forward on his crutches, his knuckles white against the metal. Audrey, Colin whispered, his voice shaking with agonizing grief. I jumped. 6 months ago, I jumped off the bridge. But they fished me out. The only thing I had in my pocket was this. He reached into his frayed coat and pulled out a tarnished, scratched piece of metal. The Northstar pin. The pin he had given me when we were 12, and which I had tossed into the champagne bucket on the night of the banquet. I went back to the hotel after you left, Colin sobbed, holding the pin through the bars like a sacred relic. I dug through the trash bins behind the kitchen until I found it. Audrey, I loved you. I was an idiot, I was blind, I let her poison my mind. But it was always you. Please, let me come in. Let me just sit in the back of your lecture hall. Let me just look at you. The 3 of them knelt in the freezing slush outside the iron gate, looking up at me as if I were a goddess with the power to resurrect their ruined lives. I looked at them. I looked at my mother, who had starved my childhood to feed a monster. I looked at my brother, who had poisoned my body for a smile from a cheat. I looked at my childhood friend, who had knocked me to the floor and stepped over my bleeding head. My heart beat with a slow, steady, magnificent rhythm. There was no hatred left. Hatred requires an emotional investment, and they were no longer rich enough to buy even a fraction of my attention. Mrs. Sutton, I said, my voice cutting through the winter air like a clean, polished diamond. Mr. Sutton. Mr. Barrett. Hearing their formal names stripped of all warmth hit them like 3 physical blows. Mom gasped, clutching her chest. You came to the wrong place, I said softly. The daughter you starved died in that hotel ballroom. The sister you poisoned died in that examination bathroom stall. The girl who loved you, Colin, died the moment you pushed her into the coffee table. I drew my navy wool scarf tighter around my neck, adjusting the leather portfolio under my arm. The woman standing in front of you is Dr. Audrey Sutton, lead fellow of the Northstar Institute. She does not know you. She owes you nothing. And she will never look back at you again. Audrey. No. Audrey. Mom shrieked, clawing at the iron bars, her voice echoing across the snowy quadrangle. I am your mother. You cannot leave me in the cold. Officer Miller, I said, turning to the security guard without a single backward glance. Please escort these trespassers off the university grounds. Right away, Dr. Sutton. The guard blew his whistle, and 3 more security officers stepped forward, pulling my mother, my brother, and Colin away from the gate. Their screams, their sobs, their desperate apologies echoed into the falling snow. Audrey, please, look at me. Just look at me once. Audrey, I'm your brother. Audrey. The heavy iron gates of Northstar shut with a deep, final, echoing clang. The noise faded behind me, swallowed entirely by the vast, serene quiet of the winter campus. I walked up the stone steps of the great hall, pushing open the heavy oak doors. Inside, the grand lecture room was bathed in the warm, golden light of chandeliers. Hundreds of brilliant students, professors, and visiting scholars stood up, applauding as I walked down the center aisle toward the podium to deliver the keynote address. Dean Vance smiled from the front row. Dr. Thorne gave me a proud, knowing nod. I set my portfolio on the wooden lectern, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of bright, eager, intelligent faces waiting to hear my words. Outside the arched stained glass windows, the snow fell silently, covering the old tracks, the old scars, and the ruined world I had left behind. I took a deep, effortless breath of the warm, cedar-scented air. My hands were steady. My mind was untainted. My future was entirely, beautifully, and unconditionally my own. I smiled, opened my notes, and began to speak.